Greetings, I'm Howard and welcome to the first episode of Daggone Gaming, where we review the latest video games, make fun let's plays, and most importantly discuss the social and cultural impact of video games. For the majority of my life, I have been an avid gamer, and for the majority of my life, I've had to identify with video game characters that didn't represent me. As a teenage black kid, you were only supposed to like rap, sneakers, and big butts. And if you did like video games, well, you were relegated to games like 50 Cent's Blood and Sand. And if you haven't guessed it yet, this episode is about the lack of black representation in the games industry. Now, you would think black representation would be higher, given that video games might not even exist without a black man. BS, you say? Well, in the mid-1970s, an African-American engineer named Jerry Lawson invented the video game cartridge for Fairchild Semiconductor. You would think this would lead to a proliferation of African-Americans in the games industry. Only it didn't. Growing up, the black kids I knew only cared about games like Madden. It would be an embarrassment to admit to playing games like Metal Gear Solid or Legend of Zelda, games that I love so much. So that left me with no one to share my passion with. At that time, there wasn't a black games journalist to validate my hobby. And since this predates YouTube, there was no YouTube personality for me to watch. Even in the current day, there are very few African-American journalists or YouTubers. Part of this problem has to be due to the lack of representation in the games themselves. Now you might be saying, I've seen black characters in games before. And yeah, you might find a black supporting character in a AAA game, like Bennett Wallace in Final Fantasy VII, or Sergeant Johnson in the Halo series. But a black male playable protagonist is a rarity. And a playable black female protagonist might as well be a unicorn. In the current lifecycle of PS4 and Xbox One, only 5 of the approximately 50 AAA single-player titles released since launch have featured a black playable protagonist. 2 of the 50 games utilize a character creator for their story's main protagonist. And while character creators are a terrific means of letting anyone be represented, I would still like to see more AAA titles craft a story with a black lead in mind, like Watch Dogs 2 and Halo 5. So how do we get more black leads in games? Well, I think the first part of the solution is simple. Value development and engineering as much as other races do. If your son or daughter shows interest in video games, encourage it. Fan the flame that one day could lead to a job at a larger developer and affect change. Secondly, if you're a black gamer, introduce great games to your friends and family. Find something that you think will resonate and leave a lasting impression. And maybe you've just created another voice for change. Lastly, be the voice yourself. With the myriad of social media platforms, everyone has a soapbox. So stand on yours, and let the developers and publishers know that you want representation in their game. This show is my soapbox. I hope to represent and identify with any gamers who feel marginalized. That brings us to the conclusion of this episode. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and share. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HowIsThereForHire.